Chapter 11. Who Are We? A month ago, Boris Moisevich returned to these parts, Alexander told me. This time he had no assistants or guards with him. He looked me up. He was quiet and pensive. He and I talked for a whole day. It wasn't so much a conversation as a confession on his part. It wasn't me he was confessing to, of course, but to himself. He gave me a copy of his report on his contact with Anastasia. I copied out some excerpts for you. Would you like me to read them? Who commissioned the report? I don't know. Even Boris Moisevich doesn't know. He had a meeting with whoever it was in an opulent salon with a fireplace. His sponsor identified himself as a representative of the International Academy. But so many academies have sprouted up recently, it's hard to tell which of them are the really serious ones. Now people have begun judging the seriousness of an organization by the amount of funding it gets. The sponsor hadn't scrimped on the financing. He had paid for the whole trip right off in cash and promised not only a substantial bonus but also the future involvement of the whole unit Boris Moisevich headed in a serious scientific project connected with Anastasia. When Boris Moisevich met with him upon his return to Moscow and presented his report, the sponsor took only a cursory look at it. No doubt he had already been informed of its contents. He threw the report into the fireplace and said to Boris Moisevich, "You were supposed to establish contact with Object X, as you yourself referred to Anastasia. In carrying out the project, you employed not only your own scientific methods and techniques of persuasion, but also violence. The violence was your own initiative. We have decided to double your fee for organizing the expedition, and at the same time cancel our agreements with you for any future activity. Here, take your money," he said, pointing to a briefcase standing beside his chair, "and forget about the whole thing." Boris Moisevich tried to explain that the violence had erupted spontaneously and that he himself found the whole episode quite distasteful. And he realized what harm his group's inexpertness had inflicted on future contacts with Anastasia, and for that reason he would not take any fee at all. At that point, the man sitting by the fireplace got up from his chair and in a tone that brooked no contradiction, articulated, "You will take it, and you will leave. You didn't care about the cause, only the money, so here, take it. We don't need you any more." Boris Moisevich took the briefcase with the money and left the spacious office salon. He tried to share the money in equal amounts among the members of the expedition, but not all of them accepted it. It only seemed to emphasize the tremendous feeling of unpleasantness at what had been wrought by the participants. "How come you only copied out excerpts of the report for me?" I asked Alexander. "Judging by your book, you don't really fancy reading documents filled with terms you don't understand. I tried to copy out only the important points and places where there wasn't too much specialized terminology." "So, what do they say about Anastasia?" Alexander pulled some printed pages out of his pocket and began reading them to me. "Object X cannot be studied by traditional scientific research methods known to us today. The evaluation criteria currently accepted in scientific circles inevitably posit particular frameworks which automatically exclude properties hitherto unknown and the possibility of encountering phenomena arising out of and connected with isolated situations and the changing psychological state of Object X. As an information source in various areas of scientific research, the object may prove to have no equal among the sources currently known to science. The object is most likely not an information carrier in itself. It is not interested in simply receiving and analyzing information. However, should there arise a particular goal, and consequently a desire, which it deems significant, information accrues to it in a form selected by an unknown entity and in the required amount for which Object X may instantly find a practical application. Our group was able to offer only a few hypotheses, but we did confirm experimentally a number of Object X's sayings regarding plants. We were able to establish the existence of the ray, The scientific terms torsion field and radio wave emissions are not really suitable here. If they are used at all, it is only because there are no other more suitable terms. The most incredible and doubtful hypothesis, in our view, was the possibility of infusing the text of the book with hidden combinations and signs, according to Object X's terminology, of the depths of eternity and the infinity of the cosmos. The object affirmed that these signs may have a beneficial effect on people. We were recommending conducting a series of experiments, comparing the parameters of the physiological changes in human beings before and after reading the book, with the help of measuring devices used in medical practice. This does not make much sense anymore. Already we are compelled to confirm that the fact of their existence is indisputable. These changes are not affected through the material, physiological organs of the body, but at some intangible, non-material level of society as a whole. One has the impression that within the milieu of the community of people living on the earth, a reaction is beginning to take place which we are not in a position to arrest, or, for that matter, even control. The basic evidence of such a reaction is the psychic response observed in those who have come in contact with the book. Questionnaires, along with examination and analysis of readers' correspondence, attest to the fact that a majority of readers have experienced a creative urge expressed in the form of poetic compositions, sketches, and drawings, along with the writing and performing of songs. Many readers have felt the impulse to make contact with and cultivate plants, or to change their profession. In certain cases, the reading of the book is followed by a significant improvement in one's sense of well-being and the disappearance of symptoms of disease. We conducted an experiment on 30 people having various ailments. In a psychotherapy sleep therapy unit, they were asked to read the text of the book. In the case of 27 of them, an emotional concentration was observed, along with lack of sleep and an increased hemoglobin count in the blood. If we assume that this reaction on the part of these readers is due to the vividness of the image of literary art, one can confirm that in terms of psychological effect, this particular image far surpasses by several degrees all those hitherto unknown, including classical and biblical images. The indisputability of such a conclusion is confirmed by the percentage of readers who have expressed their relationship to the book in poetic and other creative forms. According to our statistical survey, this has happened with as many as 1 in every 19 readers. Moreover, it should be noted that the author's expository style is primitive to the extreme. It does not follow any established norm of the literary arts, and the text is replete with grammatical errors. But a computer analysis of the book's readability shows that it has a readability rating of 80% or higher. In our direct contact with Object X, we noticed a phenomenon encountered nowhere else before, and with no counterpart in any data observed or recorded by ufologists. We observed a spheroid energy mass resembling large ball lightning. Its energy potential far surpasses existing scientific concepts of the power of natural energies. Its abilities to change the Earth's gravitational field in a specific location affords it the possibility of instantaneously transforming anything not rooted in the ground into cosmic dust. During the period of our contact, the Earth's gravitation was changed slightly, but with any increase in its power output, we and all material objects might have simply found ourselves somewhere out in space. By contrast, the gravitational field around Object X was not changed, which attests to the possibility of selective influence. It was evidence that the change in the Earth's gravitational attraction was preceded by a reduction in the blue spectrum of natural light. One could hypothesize that the so-called gravitational attraction of the Earth is not dependent on the Earth itself, but on the pressure of light emanating from certain celestial objects, energies, or the Earth's atmosphere as created by an intelligent being. Despite its ability to acquire large quantities of information, Object X does not attempt to subject it to analysis. It processes the information it receives on the level of feelings and intuition, from which arises an impression of naivete. The interrelationships between Object X and the energy mass are simple and commonplace, established on the basis of feelings, with no trace of servility or idealization. They are characterized by full freedom of action in a context of mutual respect. The luminous energy mass we observe possesses intelligence and, even more incredibly, feelings, something which UFOologists have not noted in connection with a single UFO. This is evidenced by the fact that during contact with Object X, the rays of the energy mass stroked its feet and hair, and that the mass itself, through its movements, reacted to Object X's emotional state. Along with the capability of exerting a physiological effect on matter, the phenomenon perceived by us also has the capacity to produce a psychological effect. It may be hypothesized that Object X may represent an earthly human being who is periodically contacted by representatives of an extraterrestrial civilization, or that it is in communication with some kind of natural phenomenon which does not lend itself to scientific investigation. It may be further hypothesized that Object X itself represents an extraterrestrial civilization. However, the object's own declaration, "I am man, I am a woman," contradicts this hypothesis. Such a declaration places us in an unresolvable dilemma, as the question inevitably arises, who then are we? Or, to put it another way, has mankind been treading a path of progress or regression? Chapter 12. Man-Made Mutants. Okay, that's enough, I interrupted Alexander. For me, Anastasia is just a recluse. Maybe she's got some unusual abilities, but I would say she's human. She's man. Let's hope so, anyway. If I think about everything too much, I could go nuts. So, start up that old rattletrap motor of yours and let's go. It took us about 4 hours to get to the remote settlement. After I had set foot on the familiar stretch of shoreline, Alexander also got out of the boat and once again tried to persuade me. Anastasia's gone, Vladimir. Really, give it some thought. You can still change your mind about trying to reach her glade. You won't make it. I'm going. I was hoisted my backpack to sling it over my shoulder when I suddenly noticed Alexander unsheathing a large hunting knife. I threw the backpack down and rifled about on the ground for something I could defend myself with, but Alexander, having bared his right arm to the elbow, suddenly slashed his own arm with the knife and covered the gushing blood with a white linen scarf he had. Then he asked me to fetch the first aid kit from the motorboat and bind his wounded arm. I did this, still in a state of bewilderment. He handed me the blood-soaked scarf, saying, "Tie this around your head." "What for?" "At least that way the hunters won't touch you. They will not fire at a wounded man." "You think those hunters of yours are dumb or something? They only have to come close and they'll see right off it's a prop." "They won't come close. Why take the chance? They've all got their own territories and pathways. If someone needs to go into the taiga for a good reason, he'll talk to the hunters first, tell them about himself and what he intends to do, and coordinate his route with them. If they think he has a good reason, they'll help him, give him advice, and may even provide an escort. But they know nothing about you. They may shoot first and ask questions later, but they won't fire at a wounded man." I took the blood-soaked scarf and tied it around my head. I guess I'm supposed to say thank you, but somehow I don't feel like thanking you. No need to. I didn't do it for thanks. I just wanted to do at least something for you. When you get back, light a fire on the riverbank. I'll be passing close by from time to time, and if I see the smoke, I'll come pick you up. If, that is, you manage to get back. As I was walking along, I noticed a couple of dogs about 100 meters away. Probably from the settlement, I thought. I wished they would come closer, as dogs had a quieting effect on me. I even tried to attract their attention, but they didn't approach, only kept a parallel course to mine. And so we went deeper into the taiga. It was pointless for Alexander to try and scare me, I thought. The taiga didn't seem hostile to me at all. Maybe it was because I knew at the back of my mind that here, amidst the trees and the moss-covered logs, lived Anastasia, and even if she was strange, she was still a kind person. I held to the notion that here in the taiga, with all its tangled undergrowth, its sounds and air so unfamiliar to city dwellers, lived my very own son. This thought made the taiga feel just a bit more like home to me. The 25 kilometers from the riverbank to the glade presented much more of a challenge than walking along an ordinary road, since there were fallen trees to climb over and thickets to go around. The time I had been walking with Anastasia, I hadn't noticed all these barriers, immersed as we were in conversation. The main thing now was not to lose my sense of direction on account of them, and I began checking my compass more often, all the while thinking, how did Anastasia find her glade with no compass? It certainly didn't look as though there were any kind of pathway. Stopping to rest after every hour, by noon I got to a shallow stream about 2 meters wide. Anastasia and I had also forded a stream, I remembered. I decided to go across and stop for some time in a glade just on the other side. I made my way along the trunk of a partly rotted tree which had fallen into the stream. The tree didn't extend all the way across, so after tossing my backpack, I made a jump for the shore. But something happened. My leg fell on some kind of protruding snag and got twisted or sprained somehow. I felt a searing pain through my whole leg, and it even spread to my head. I lay there a few minutes and then tried to get up. I realized I couldn't walk. So I lay there, reflecting on what to do next. I tried to remember what you're supposed to do when you twist or sprain your leg, but I had a hard time remembering, probably because the pain was so intense. Then I decided I would lie still for a while, have a bite to eat, and maybe the pain would go away. If need be, I would light a fire and spend the night there. Maybe by morning my leg would even be better. After all, everything with man heals itself eventually. It was at this point that I caught sight of the dogs again. There were 4 of them now, and 2 more on the other side, and they weren't going anywhere. They took up their positions on either flank about 10 meters from me. The dogs were of various breeds. One was an Airedale, another was a Boxer. The remainder were mongrels. And there was a little lapdog among them. Their coats were ragged, and they were terribly thin. The Airedale's eyes were festering. I remembered hearing my captain's first mate telling me about dogs like this, and my sudden awareness of the precariousness of my situation made even the pain in my leg disappear temporarily. The first mate of my headquarters ship told how people who didn't want their pets around anymore would take them off somewhere and abandon them. If they dropped them off within the city limits, the cats and dogs would hang around various scrap heaps and at least get a little something to keep them going. When dogs were taken out to a remote area far outside of town, they would group together in gangs and get their food by attacking a living creature, including people, especially people all by themselves. These dogs are actually more frightening than wolves. They'll lie in wait for a wounded or exhausted victim and then attack their prey simultaneously. Another thing that makes these gangs of homeless mad dogs more frightening than wolves is their superior knowledge of human habits and their hatred of human beings. They have it in for people. They have no experience hunting for wild game, but people are their prey. It's especially frightening when the gang includes at least one dog who's been trained to attack human beings. I once had a dog which I took to a private obedience school. The training program included attacking a person on command. The instructor's assistant would put on a padded coat with long sleeves, and the dog would be taught to attack him viciously. If the dog carried out the command properly, he would be rewarded with a treat. They sure went through their paces, those smart-asses. I wonder if there is any other creature on Earth, apart from man, that finds it necessary to teach another species to attack one of the teacher's own kind. The dogs around me began to tighten their circle. I needed to show them, I thought, that I was still alive, that I could move about and defend myself. I picked up a short stick and chucked it at the closest mangy bitch. It managed to dodge the stick and take up a new position. There weren't any other sticks within reach. Then I got a couple of tins of preserves out of my backpack. As I was getting them, the smallest of the gang, the lapdog, stole up from behind, tore a piece out of my trouser leg with its teeth, and then jumped back. The other dogs watched, probably to see my reaction. I took one of the tins and chucked it at the nearest large pooch. The other I threw at the lapdog. There was nothing else to throw. My consciousness was overwhelmed with a sense of hopelessness. I began imagining how the dogs would tear apart my body and eat it in pieces, and how I would still be conscious for some time and witness it all and writhe in pain, since the dogs wouldn't be able to finish me off all at once. And I had nothing with me to bring on a quick death and escape extended torture. One thing I felt especially bad about was that I wouldn't be able to deliver my backpack containing the gifts for Anastasia from my readers, along with various kitty items a young child would need. Half my backpack was taken up with readers' letters full of questions and requests, a lot of letters. Most unusual letters. They wrote from the heart. They wrote about their lives. And there were lots of poems. Maybe not too professionally crafted, not always rhyming, but still there was something good about them. And now they would all be lost, rotting away here in the taiga. And then a thought struck me. Out of the blue, I decided to write a note and place it in the plastic bag with the letters. A note! If anyone found my backpack, they could take all its contents and the money, too. And they could send the readers' letters back to my daughter, Polina. I told her in the note to publish them once there were enough royalties from my book to cover the expense. It would be a crime for so many soul-inspired poems to be lost forever. Many of their authors were likely writing the first poem in their life, something that came straight from their heart, and now the only poem they ever wrote in their life would be lost. It was quite a challenge writing the note. My hands were trembling, from fear most probably. And just why does man cling so tight to life, even in a situation where it is absolutely clear that it's all over? But I managed to finish the note and put it in the plastic bag with the letters. I tied the bag tight so moisture wouldn't get in. And then, all at once, I noticed that the dogs, which had already come quite close to me, were beginning to execute a rather strange maneuver. One by one, they started crawling away from me. Some of them were sitting up on their haunches, looking in the other direction, away from me, and then lay down again, as though in ambush. I managed to get up on one leg and take a look and see what had distracted them. And then I saw how along the stream, with leaps and bounds, came running none other than Anastasia. Her magnificent golden hair trailing in the breeze, and her sweeping stride was so utterly beautiful that I completely forgot about my own danger in admiring the scene. And all of a sudden it hit me. The dogs! They were no doubt under the impression that their prey might now be taken from them, and they were getting set to attack the newcomer running so determinedly toward them. The starving dogs, brutalized by the wilds, would viciously fight for their prey to the end. Anastasia would not be able to do anything about them all by herself. The dogs would tear her apart, and I cried out as loud as I could, "Stop, Anastasia, stop! Dogs, wild dogs here! Don't come this way, Anastasia, stop!" Anastasia heard me, but didn't let up her bounding stride for a moment. But while she ran, she waved her hand in the air. What has she done now? I thought. The extraordinary phenomenon she could call upon wouldn't be able to help her now. As quickly as I could, I pulled out of my backpack the little glass jars of baby food. I started throwing them at the dogs, trying to attract their attention to myself and away from Anastasia. One of the jars hit its mark, but the dogs paid no attention to my efforts. No doubt they realized who their real threat was. No sooner had Anastasia entered their circle than the dogs attacked her from all sides at once, and then... Oh, what a sight it was! You'd have had to see it to believe it. Anastasia transformed all the energy of her run into a spin. All at once she broke her stride and spun about sharply like a top or a ballerina twirling on stage, only faster. Upon striking Anastasia's rotating body, the dogs flew off in different directions without causing her any harm. But then, once she had stopped spinning, they got ready to launch a new attack. I crawled over toward Anastasia. She was wearing her short, lightweight dress. If only she'd been wearing her quilted jacket, it would have been harder for the dogs to bite through. Anastasia got down on one knee, As she knelt there in the circle of the vicious dogs that were half crazed by hunger, her face betrayed no fear. She looked at me and said briskly, "Hello, Vladimir. Only do not be afraid. Just relax a little. Let go. Do not worry. They will not do anything to me, these starving little dogs. Not to worry." Two huge mutts once more launched an attack on Anastasia from either side. Without getting up and without ceasing her talking, a lightning-fast movement from her hands caught each of the dogs in mid-air by its front paw and spun it around. Moving her body slightly to one side, she let the dogs crash into each other and drop to the ground. The other dogs had once more taken up a position, no doubt getting ready for a new attack, but this time they stayed put. Anastasia stood up and swept her hand up in the air. Lowering it, she slapped herself twice on the thigh. From behind the nearby thickets there suddenly sprang out 4 mature wolves. There was such determination in their headlong dash that it seemed they would not think to take account of the number or strength of the foe before them. They were spoiling for a fight. The dogs put their tails between their legs and headed off lickety-split. The wolves ran right past me, practically spraying me with their hot breath. Right on their heels, a young wolf cub breezed past in a flicker, trying with all his might, in spite of his shorter stride, not to fall behind the pack. When he reached the spot where Anastasia was standing, he suddenly braked with all 4 paws, and even did a somersault. Then he jumped up and gave 2 licks to the fresh scratch on Anastasia's bare foot. Anastasia abruptly grabbed the cub by his torso and hoisted him up in the air. "Where are you off to?" she said. "It's not your time yet. You are still too little." The cub began squirming all over in Anastasia's arms and whining like a puppy. He managed to escape, or rather, she herself let him go. Once more on the ground, the cub gave one more quick lick to Anastasia's scratch and set off to catch up with the pack. "But why?" I began questioning Anastasia as she headed over to me. "Why didn't you call in the wolves right off? Why?" Anastasia smiled and proceeded at once to feel my arms and legs. With her pure, calming voice, she said, "Please do not worry. I need to show the dogs that man is always superior to them. The wolves they fear in any case, but the dogs have begun making attacks on man. Now they will no longer attack man." "Not to worry. I felt your presence and could tell you were coming. I ran to meet you. Why did you take such a risk in coming into the taiga all by yourself? At first I could not find you, and then I guessed you must have set out on your own." Anastasia ran off to one side and plucked up some kind of grasses. Then she looked in a different place and did the same. She rubbed the grasses between her hands and carefully soothed my sore leg with her moist palms. And she kept talking non-stop. "It will go away. It will pass quickly before you can say Jack Robinson." I noticed Anastasia frequently used proverbs and sayings, and I asked, "Where did you pick up these sayings?" "I sometimes listen to how various people speak, to learn how to express a greater meaning in just a few words. That displeases you?" "Well, sometimes they're not quite apropos." "And sometimes they are? Well, apropos? It is good when they are propos." "How do you mean, propos?" "That was your word. I was just repeating it." "Tell me, Anastasia, is it still a long way to your glade?" "You have come halfway. Together we shall get there quickly." "It probably won't be very quick, as long as my leg hurts like this." "Yes, it may still hurt a bit longer. Let your leg rest, and I shall help you walk." Anastasia hoisted the heavy backpack onto her shoulders, then, turning her back to me, squatted down on one knee and invited me to climb on. "Take hold of me and climb onto my back," she said this with such briskness and determination that I immediately obeyed, clasping my arms around her neck. Anastasia promptly rose to her feet and skipped off at a sprightly gait. And throughout our journey she kept talking on the run. "Not too heavy for you?" I asked after some time. "One's own burdens are light," replied Anastasia, adding with a laugh, "I'm a horse, and I'm an ox, I'm a wench, and I'm a jock." "Stop, let me down. I'll try walking on my own." "But you are not too heavy for me. Why do you want to try on your own?" "What's that about a jock? I'm a wench, and I'm a jock, you said?" "Just another saying. It was not apropos, eh? Did it offend you?" It's okay. I simply want to try walking on my own. If you could just carry my backpack a little while longer. If you want to walk on your own, you will have to rest your leg at least another hour, she advised as she gently lowered me to the ground. You sit there for a bit. I shall return before long. At that, Anastasia ran off for a little while on her own. She presently returned with a bundle of various grasses and once more began rubbing them into my leg near my ankle. Then she sat down beside me and smiled as she slyly eyed my backpack. All at once she asked, Vladimir, please tell me what's in your backpack. Some letters from readers, also gifts they sent me to you. And I've bought a little something for the baby. Could you show me the gifts now while we are resting? And will you show me the baby, our son? You're not going to tell me that he can't see me until I've cleansed myself. Fine, I shall show you our son, only not right away. Tomorrow I shall show you. The first thing you need to do is to learn a bit about how to converse with him. You will learn quickly once you see him. Tomorrow's okay. I undid the backpack and began to take out its contents. First, the gifts for Anastasia. She took each item carefully in her hands and looked at it with interest, caressing it. She started playing on the Valdai bells, a present from Olga Sidorovna, and when I handed her a beautiful, large, colorful shawl, a gift from a very kind woman, Valentina Ivanova, I realized right off, women are women, and they all have a lot in common. Anastasia took the shawl and turned it over in her hands. Then she performed a whole series of manipulations with it. She tied the shawl around her head, just like the picture on the Alyonushka chocolate bar label, and then in other variations as well. Then, with a laugh, she tied the shawl around her waist in gypsy fashion, before throwing it over her shoulders and parading before me in some kind of folk dance. Then she neatly folded the shawl and placed it over the presents spread out on the grass and said, Please, Vladimir, say thank you from me to each person. Thank these women for the warmth of their heart that they sent along with each of these things. I'll thank everyone I see, but I have nothing more to show you. The remaining things aren't for you. They are for our son. All the things he needs. You can't use these things. I'll show them to you on the spot when we get there. Why do you not want to do this now? We are just sitting here and resting. I would be most interested in seeing what you have. I didn't want to show Anastasia right off what I had bought for our son, since I remembered what she had said back the first time we met. You will want to get our son all sorts of senseless toys, but he will not need them at all. You are the one who needs them for your own self-satisfaction, so you can say, Oh, look at me, I'm so good and caring. But then I still decided to show them to her, since I myself was interested in how she would react to the achievements of our civilization in matters of childcare. I started showing Anastasia the diapers I had brought, explaining how effectively they absorb moisture when the baby wets them, so he doesn't perspire. I told her everything I had seen in the TV commercial. I showed her the baby food. You see, Anastasia, this baby food is simply a marvel. It contains all the substances a baby needs. Vitamin supplements, too. The main thing is, it's so easy to prepare. Just dissolve in warm water and the food's ready. Got it? I got it. Well, now you see the factory chimneys of our technocratic world aren't just blowing smoke for nothing. We've got some factories producing baby food like this, and the packaging for it. You see that beautiful baby pictured on the package, all smiling and rosy-cheeked? I see. Finally, I showed Anastasia my last gift and commented, This is a children's construction set. A construction set's not like a senseless noisemaker. It says here it is specially designed to help the child develop. He can build a car with it, like in the picture, or a steam engine, or an airplane, or a house. Well, maybe it'll suit our son a little later. Right now, of course, it's still early for him to make sense of what moves and flies and how. Why early? He can make sense of all that right now, replied Anastasia. You see, the construction set will help him in this, I observed. Do you think so? Are you certain about that? I'm not the only one who's certain, Anastasia. There's a whole bunch of scientists and psychologists who study children's mental development. You see, their endorsements are printed right here on the box. Fine, Vladimir, fine. Not to worry. You will do everything the way you feel you should. Only I would ask you to take a look first. Observe how our son lives. Then you will be able to determine what his first priorities are. Right, whatever you say. I was glad that Anastasia did not argue with the need for the things I had brought. I would be able to look for myself and decide. In the meantime, let us hide your backpack here, she said. Then, once you determine what thing is needed first, I shall run and fetch it. Or I shall fetch the whole backpack if necessary. Right now, it is heavy to carry. Your leg still hurts after all, and you do not wish me to carry you. Well, okay. Let's hide it for the time being, I agreed. Only we'll take the letters with us. There are a lot of questions in them for you. I didn't memorize them all. Fine, we shall bring the letters, Anastasia agreed, taking the package. Once she had hid my backpack in a safe place, I leaned my arm on her shoulder, and the two of us headed off in the direction of her glade. It was late at night by the time we arrived. As before, the glade was empty. No structures, not even a lean-to. But somehow I got the feeling that I had come home. Even my mood was uplifted, and a sense of calm had set in. I felt like going to sleep, probably because I had been talking all the previous night with Alexander. Wow, I thought, there's absolutely nothing in this glade, and yet I get the feeling I've come home. Evidently, one's sense of home is not in the size of one's living space, or even a castle, but in something else. Anastasia at once took me to her lake and recommended I bathe. I really didn't feel like bathing, but I thought I should be obedient to her in everything, at least for now, so I'd get to see my son sooner. When I came out onto the shore after bathing, it was colder than in the water. Anastasia dried me off with the palms of her hands, wiped me with some kind of grasses, and my body began to feel warm, even hot. Then she handed me her dress and said with a laugh, Please put it on, Vladimir. It will be like a nightshirt for you. I shall soak and wash your clothing, which has a strong odor coming from it. I put on Anastasia's dress. I knew the odor must be eliminated, and that was that. So our son won't be scared off? For him, too, Anastasia replied. But it'll be cold for me to sleep in nothing but a dress. Not to worry, I have already arranged everything. You will have a good night's sleep, and you will not be cold. You can put the packet with the letters under your head for a pillow. I have thought of everything. You will have a good night's sleep, and you will not freeze. With the bear to keep me warm again, eh? I will not sleep with a bear. I'll manage somehow on my own. I have made up your bed so that you will not be too cold or too hot. We went to the dugout where I had slept before. Anastasia pushed aside the branches hanging over the entrance. I caught the pleasant aroma from the dried grasses and crawled into the dugout, lay down amidst the grasses, and felt the sleep of sweet languor envelop me all around. You can cover yourself with my cardigan, but even without it, you will still not be cold. If you wish, I shall also lie down beside you and keep you warm. I heard Anastasia's words through a half-sleep and responded, No need, you'd better go to our son, keep him warm. Not to worry, Vladimir, our son is already capable of handling a great deal on his own. How can he do things on his own? He's still too young. But that was all I could say. I was already immersed in a deep and calm, blissful sleep. Chapter 13. A New Morning, a New Life. I woke in the morning. I felt in such an extraordinarily good mood that I just lay there thinking I'd better not budge for the time being, lest the good mood suddenly vanish. What kind of night did I have anyway? And why did I get the impression in the morning that over the past night my whole body and consciousness were literally bathed in love? By the light of day it became clear to me why I had felt neither too cold nor too hot during the night. I was lying immersed in dry grasses and flowers which gave off a pleasant warmth and aroma. Readers often ask how Anastasia keeps from freezing in the winter-time during the cruel Siberian frosts, but it's really all so simple. If you bury yourself in a haystack, there are no frosts to fear. Granted, she has some sort of alternative source of warmth, given that she can walk about semi-nude even when it's 5 degrees out and doesn't get cold. She even goes swimming then and doesn't give off so much as a shiver when she comes out of the water. I continued to lie there in the bliss of my dried grasses and thought about how the morning breaking meant a new day had come, and I got the impression as though a new life were beginning. I thought, if only this were the way it could be every morning. Then, in one lifetime, one could live 1,000 ages, as it were, and each age would be as magnificent as this morning. But how does one make each new day turn out as magnificent as this morning? I didn't get up until I heard Anastasia's cheerful voice calling out to me, "God surely gives to him who rises early." I crawled out of my splendid nighttime lodgings. Anastasia was already standing right up there at the entrance. Her golden hair was woven into a braid which was tied with grasses at the end like a bow. Her new hairdo looked very nice on her. "Let's go to the lake. You can wash yourself and get dressed," Anastasia proposed, tossing her braid coquettishly to the front. Well, now, women are women, after all, I thought, and said to her aloud, "That's a very pretty braid you have, Anastasia." "Pretty, eh?" "Very, very pretty," she laughed as she twirled around. We ran to the lake. There on the shore, over some branches, were hanging my shirt, trousers, undershirt, in some, everything I had taken off the night before. I felt them, and they were dry already. "How did you manage to dry them so quickly?" "I gave them some help," Anastasia replied. "I put them on myself and ran about a little wearing your clothes, and they dried out very quickly. Now you will be able to put them on after your dip in the lake." "And are you going to be taking a dip too?" "I have already done everything I need to greet the day." Before I went into the water, Anastasia rubbed my body down with some sort of paste made from grass. And when I plunged in, the water all around me began to sizzle and my body smarted a little. But when I came out, I felt really refreshed, as though the pores of my skin were starting to breathe with great intensity all by themselves, each one taking in air individually. My overall breathing was free and easy. Just as she had done the night before, Anastasia, ever so cheerful and playful, began once more to rub the moisture off my body with her hands. As she was rubbing my back, I suddenly felt something hot unexpectedly spurt down my spine. It happened once, then again. I turned about sharply, and there she was, squeezing her breast with both hands, aiming a stream of warm breast milk right into my face. Then from the other breast a stream of milk spurted onto my chest, and then she let loose with a fast rub up and down my body, accompanied by a roar of laughter. "What are you doing that for?" I asked when I had recovered from my surprise. Because, scoffed Anastasia as she handed me my shirt and trousers. They, too, did not smell the way they did before, and I noticed this as soon as I put them on. Then I said to Anastasia in a serious tone, "Okay, I've done everything as you've wished. Now, let me see our son." "Fine, we shall go. Only please, Vladimir, do not try to approach him right off. Watch him for a while at first. Try to understand him." "Fine, I'll watch, okay, and I'll understand." We went back to the glade, which was now so familiar to me. When we reached the bushes at the edge of the glade, Anastasia said, "Let us sit here quietly and watch. He will be waking up now, and you will see him." Beside a tree at the edge of the glade, the bear was lying on her side, but I couldn't see any baby. I was getting more and more excited, and my heart started beating strangely. "Where is he?" I asked Anastasia with bated breath. "Look more closely," she replied. "Look, you can see his little head and feet sticking out from under the bear's paw. That's where he sleeps, in her groin. It is soft and warm there, and she keeps her paw on top of him, not pressing down, but just to provide a little covering." And I saw the scene. The boy's tiny body was resting in a cradle of thick bear fur in the huge beast's groin under her slightly raised front paw. The bear was lying on her side without stirring, turning only her head from side to side as she looked around. The wee little legs wiggled in the thick fur, at which point the bear raised her paw a little more. The baby was waking up. When he moved his arm, the bear raised her paw. When his arm dropped back to his side, she lowered her paw a little. Only her paw and head moved. There was not a stir from the rest of her body. "How can she lie like that without stirring? Isn't it uncomfortable to maintain that one position the whole time?" I asked. "She can lie like that without stirring for a long, long time. and it is not hard for her at all. She is just so thrilled when he crawls into his little bed. And now she has started to take herself very seriously. She has a sense of responsibility. When the time approached to start a family, she did not even let her intended mate come near her. That is not too good, but when our son grows a little, she will allow her mate to approach her again. As I listened to Anastasia, I couldn't take my eyes off our son. I watched as the little feet once again wiggled beneath the bear's huge paw. Then the paw went up in the air. The baby moved his arms and legs, stretched himself, raised his head, then all at once stopped moving. Why did he stop moving? Is he going back to sleep? I asked Anastasia. Look more closely. He's going piddle. The bear did not manage to let him down to the ground on time, or perhaps she did not want to. She really spoils him, you know. The little fountain kept trickling onto the bear's fur. Like the boy, she too had stopped moving, even her head and her paw, until the fountain had ceased its trickle. Then the bear began to turn over onto her other side, and the baby slid down to the ground. All right, you see, she thinks he will go on to do his number 2, our little man, Anastasia said cheerfully. The tiny human body lay on the grass, tensing its abdomen muscles in preparation for his number 2, while above it hovered the enormous bear. It seemed as though the bear was helping the baby along with her rumbling sounds, as if going through a similar preparation herself. The boy turned over on his stomach, started moving his arms and crawling across the grass on all fours. His little bottom had got dirty from his pooping. The bear went over to him and lapped his tiny bottom with her enormous tongue, wiping off the poop, just like a nanny. She gave the boy a push with her tongue, and he plopped on his tummy, but got up again on all fours and went on crawling. The bear followed him and gave his bottom still another lapping, even though it was already clean by now. What do you think, Vladimir? Do you think she would be able to take off his dirty diapers or underpants and put on new ones? Anastasia asked quietly. Okay, I responded, also in a whisper. I get it. The boy turned over onto his back, and when the bear persisted in lapping his thighs, he made a nimble move and his little hand latched onto the fur on the bear's muzzle. In response to what looked to be insignificant movements by the boy's hand, the bear proceeded to rest her huge head on the ground at his feet. He grabbed hold of her muzzle, reached up with his other hand, and started climbing up the bear's head. Where on earth is he going? I queried. To the bear's eyes, responded Anastasia. Her eyes sparkle, they fascinate him, and he always wants to touch them. The boy lay on his tummy on the bear's muzzle and looked at one of her eyes. Then he tried touching it with his finger, but all at once her eyes snapped shut. The boy's finger poked at her eyelid. After waiting a while longer and still not seeing any sparkling eye, the boy began climbing down from the bear's muzzle, then crawled a little way across the grass and stopped to look at something on the ground. The bear got up and roared twice. She's calling the wolf. She needs to clean herself up and have something to eat. Now you will see how they have a friendly conversation amongst themselves, Anastasia commented. A few moments later, the she-wolf appeared at the edge of the glade. The bear did not show any signs of welcoming her presence, but greeted her with a threatening roar. The wolf's own behavior was far from friendly. She surveyed the whole glade, she pranced a bit around the edge, lay down, then took a big leap and lay down again, as though ready to pounce. What kind of friendly conversation do you call that? I asked. Why did the bear call her and then roar at her like that? And the wolf seems pretty threatening herself. That is the way they talk with each other. The bear stopped the wolf with her roar to make sure everything was in order with her, to check that she was not sick with anything, that it was not dangerous to let her approach a child man, that she was strong enough to defend him. The wolf showed that she was completely prepared. She showed it by her actions, not with words. You saw how she walked past and jumped pretty high. Indeed, the bear, after observing the wolf, calmly shuffled off out of the glade. The wolf lay down on the grass not far from the little one. The baby kept staring at something for a while longer, feeling the grass. Then he noticed the wolf and crawled toward her. As he approached, he began feeling her muzzle with his hands, stroking her teeth with his finger, patting her tongue. The wolf lapped his face, at which point little Vladimir crawled onto her stomach, felt the wolf's nipples, sucked his hand all over, and screwed his face into a frown. "Time for our son to eat," Anastasia began speaking again, "but he's not yet so hungry that he will drink the wolf's milk. I am going to leave you for a little bit, while you sit here at the edge of the glade. If he sees you and is interested, he will crawl over to you. Only do not pick him up yourself. He is already a man. Even if small in appearance, he will not understand meaningless cooing sounds. Besides, violence may result if you try to pick him up against his will. He will not understand that. Even if you do it with good intentions, but without his permission, you will make a bad impression on him." "Right," I said. "I shall not try to pick him up. I'll just sit here like this. But the wolf, she won't touch me?" "With the scent you have now, she will not touch you." Anastasia clapped her thigh twice. The wolf got up, turning her head in Anastasia's direction. Then, after a glance at the baby who had started playing again with some kind of bug, she ran over to Anastasia. Anastasia came up very near to me. She summoned the wolf to approach closer, then gestured to her to lie down. "Can I stroke her, to finally make friends with her?" I suggested. "She will not appreciate any condescending familiarity on your part. She understands everything and will not touch you, but she will not tolerate any display of superiority," Anastasia replied. She sent the wolf back out into the glade and ran off to tend to some affairs of her own, promising to return shortly. I emerged from behind the bushes where Anastasia and I had hid ourselves to observe the scene taking place in the glade. I came out and sat down on the grass about 10 meters from little Vladimir. I sat there that way for about 15 minutes. He didn't pay the slightest attention to me. I thought that as long as I continued sitting quietly, he would never pay attention to me, and so I gave a couple of clicks with my tongue. The little one turned his head and looked at me. My son, my very own son, had his eyes fixed on me with fascination, and I was excitedly looking at him. I could even feel a flush all through my body from the excitement. I had the urge to run and take his little body into my arms, squeeze him and press him against my chest, but Anastasia's request, and more significantly the presence of the wolf, held me back. And then my little son began slowly crawling toward me. He kept his eyes fixed on me all the while he was crawling. My heart started beating so loudly in my chest that I could hear it. What was it beating like that for? Maybe it would frighten the little one away. It was pounding so. But he kept crawling, and again something in the grass caught his eye, and he began poking around after a little bug. Then he began to examine something crawling along his arm. At this point, he was 3 meters away. My little son had stopped short in his crawling, only 3 meters away from me. All over, some bug. And what kind of world was out there in the grass? What kind of life had taken his fancy so? What kind of order or rules do they have in the forest anyway? Here's this little boy with his very own father right in front of him, and he's more interested in some kind of bug. That's not the way it should be. The child should know that his father is more important than a bug. All at once, the little one looked up again in my direction, showed me a toothless smile, and quickly started crawling again, more nimbly than before. I was all prepared to pick him up, but then I noticed that he kept on crawling right past me, not paying any attention to me. I looked around and saw Anastasia standing all smiles behind me, a little to one side. She sat down and put her hand on the ground, palm upturned. The boy smiled and climbed up to his mother's breast. Anastasia didn't pick him up, but ever so gently helped him climb up, ever so gently helped him reach her breast. Now he was already in her arms, clapping his tiny hands against the exposed breast and smiling at Anastasia. Then, after feeling and stroking her nipple, he closed his lips tight about it and began sucking on the supple breast. Anastasia, in the meantime, just gave one look at me, putting her finger to her lips to let me know I should keep quiet. I sat there the whole time without uttering a word while she fed our son. It seemed as though all during the feeding Anastasia was totally oblivious to my presence. Indeed, she did not seem to be aware of the world around her at all. The whole time she concentrated her gaze on our son, and it also seemed as though they were somehow communicating with each other. This impression came from the fact that after sucking for quite a while, the baby would suddenly stop, turn away from the nipple, and look into Anastasia's face. Sometimes he would be smiling. At other times his face had a serious expression. Then he became very still and slept for a while in his mother's arms. When he awoke, his face once again broke into a smile, and Anastasia sat him on the palm of her hand, supporting his back. Their faces were very close together, and the baby would feel Anastasia's face with his hands and press his cheek against hers. Then he spied me once again, and once more he fell still for a while, staring at me in fascination. All at once he reached out his little hand toward me, inched his body forward in my direction, and uttered the sound, "eh." Involuntarily, I reached out my hands to him, and at that point Anastasia handed him over to me. Here I was holding in my arms the tiny body of my very own son, the son I had so greatly desired. Everything else in the world vanished into oblivion, and I had the strong urge to do something for him. The baby felt my face, pressed his lips against it, then he recoiled with a frown, apparently feeling the prickles on my unshaven face. After that, I don't know how it happened, but I got an uncontrollable urge to kiss his warm little cheek, and I resolved to kiss him, but instead of a kiss, I somehow ended up giving his cheek 2 quick laps, the way the wolf did. The boy recoiled from me and began batting his eyelids in amazement. Anastasia's loud trills of laughter filled the glade. The baby at once reached out his little hand toward her and started laughing too, squirming in my arms. I realized he was asking to be released. My son was leaving me. Obedient to his will and the established rules of communication here, I carefully put him down on the grass. He immediately crawled over to Anastasia. She jumped up with a laugh, ran around me, and sat down on the other side of me very close, whereupon the little one turned around and with a big smile crawled over to the two of us. He climbed into Anastasia's arms and once more began to feel my face. This is how I first communicated with my son. Chapter 14. A Father's Role. My son, my little Vladimir, finally fell asleep. After his feeding, he played for a while with something in the grass. He felt a cedar cone which had fallen to the ground and tried to lap it. He looked up at the clouds floating by in the sky. He listened to the birds sing, then climbed up a little hill where the grass was thicker, curled up, closed his eyes, smiled at something, and fell asleep. Anastasia ran off to take care of some sort of tasks of her own. I set out for a walk in the forest alone, immersing myself in thought, to the exclusion of everything around me. At the same time, I couldn't get rid of the alternating feelings of joy and disappointment. I sat down under a cedar tree at the edge of the lake and decided to just sit there without moving until I thought of some way that I, as a parent, could contribute to my child's upbringing. I had to think of something to make him feel his father was the most important thing in his life. When Anastasia approached, I didn't feel like talking with her at first. It was her laughter, in fact, that had distracted my son from me. Anastasia sat quietly by my side, her hands clutching her knees, thoughtfully contemplating the calm waters of the lake. She was the first to speak. "Please do not be offended at me. Your communication struck me as so funny I could not restrain myself." "That is not what I am bothered about." "What is it then?" "Many readers' letters ask about how to bring up children. They want me to ask you everything about the system of your raising children and to describe it in my next book. But what is there to describe? There is no system. Quite the opposite. What you have here is some kind of anti-system. For example, what should fathers do under such circumstances, a reader might ask. You used a most appropriate word, anti-system. You can describe that. But who would be interested in that? People are looking for practical guides where it tells them that what they should do with their baby when he's, say, 1 month old, and then when he's 2 months old, and so on. An hourly schedule. Books that offer a dietary program. A complete timetable for the upbringing of a child according to his age. But here you have only a complete indulgence of the child's whims, an all-permissive attitude. Tell me, Vladimir, what do you want our son to be like when he grows up? What do you mean, what do I want him to be like? Of course, I want him to be a happy, normal, and successful individual. And are there many happy people amongst your acquaintances? Happy? Well, if you're talking about completely happy people, I'd have to say probably not very many. Everybody's got something not quite right with their lives. Either there's not enough money, or they're plagued by illness or family squabbles. But I want my son to avoid any kind of unpleasant experiences. Then think about it. How can he avoid them if you deliberately squeeze him into the system everyone is brought up in, and think, might there not be a certain pattern in the fact that all parents want to see their children happy, and yet they grow up and turn out just like everyone else? Not very happy? A pattern? I queried. What kind of pattern? If you know, tell me yourself. Let us ponder this question together. This is something people have been thinking about for ages, Anastasia. All kinds of scholars and specialists are pondering it. For this, they have invented all sorts of systems of child-rearing, worked out schedules, trying to find the most efficient system. Take a more careful look around you, Vladimir. See the trees, grasses, and flowers growing? How could one possibly draw up an advanced schedule of the days and hours when they should be watered? You would not go watering flowers when they are being washed with water from heaven simply because someone worked out a detailed schedule for watering them. Now you're going too far. That's just nonsense. That's not an example for raising children. It's not something that can happen in life. But you know, Vladimir, this is exactly what does happen in life. No matter what the system, it is still only a system. It is always calculated to wean the heart and soul away from man when he is still small, and to subject him to the system, so that he grows up like everyone else, in a way that will fit the system. And so it goes on for ages on end, so as to prevent the human soul from experiencing clarity of vision, to prevent man from discovering himself in his beauty as a whole, with a God-given soul. Yes, man, the ruler of all the universe. Hold on a moment. Don't get carried away beyond my reach. Speak calmly, using everyday speech. What do parents need to do to make it so? So that children will grow up, as you say, with a soul that is free, to be rulers of the universe and happy, as God himself has wished. They must not interfere. They need to see their children clearly in their own thinking the way God himself has wished. It is the aspiration of all the forces of light in the universe that each newborn child be endowed with the very best of creation. It is the parent's duty not to hide the creative light under the erudition of invented dogmas. For ages upon the earth, debates have arisen as to which system might be the wisest. But think about it yourself, Vladimir. Debates arise where truth is hid from sight. Fruitless debates can go on forevermore as to what might be found behind the closed door, but one has only to open the door, and it will be clear to all, and there will be nothing to debate, since everyone will be able to see the truth for himself. But in the final analysis, who will open the door? It is already open. All that remains is for the eyes of the soul to be open to see and gain awareness. Gain awareness of what? You were asking me about systems. You were mentioning the schedules and everyday regimes, and about how someone sets them forth for people in books. But think about it. Who can tell it more clearly about creation than the Creator himself? But the Creator doesn't tell anything. Up to now, he has hardly said a word. Nobody hears his words. Words thought up by man have many meanings. The Creator patiently and lovingly speaks with each one of us through splendid, imperishable acts. The rising of the sun, and the silvery sheen of the moon, the soft mist and tender dew, playing with the sun's rays and drinking in the heavenly blue. The universe is filled with so many clear examples like that. Just look around you. They touch you and everyone else too. Again, if everything Anastasia said about child-rearing were to be laid out, the result would probably be the complete opposite of how we handle this matter today. I have already said that Anastasia, along with her forebears through the ages, treats a newborn as a deity or an immaculate angel. They consider it totally unacceptable to interfere with the child's thought process. Anastasia's grandfather and great-grandfather were able to observe for long periods at a time how their little granddaughter would be fascinated by a bug or a flower or the contemplation of something. They tried their best not to distract her with their presence. They would converse with her only when she herself paid attention to them and showed a desire to communicate. Anastasia maintained that at the very moment I was observing little Vladimir contemplating something in the grass, he was becoming aware not only of the bugs, but of all creation. According to her, a bug is a more perfect mechanism than any manufactured product, let alone a primitive construction set. A child provided with the opportunity to communicate with these perfect beings will himself become more perfect than through communication with primitive, lifeless objects. Besides, as she maintains, every blade of grass, every bug, is interrelated with the whole of creation and subsequently aids the child in becoming aware of the essence of the universe and of himself as part of it, to become aware of his innate purpose. Artificially created objects have no such connection and do not arrange priorities and values in the child's brain in the right way. To my observation, that the conditions in which she, and now our son, were being brought up were totally different from those in which children of our civilized world are to be raised. She responded as follows: Even in the mother's womb, and especially when a helpless infant, as it seems, is given birth in the world, the forces of light in the universe rejoice. They rejoice in the trembling hope that the newly arrived immaculate godlike man will become their kind ruler and intensify the light of love from the earth. Everything has already been provided for him by the Creator. Through a bug, a tree, a blade of grass, a seemingly ferocious beast, the universe is prepared to be a good nurse for him. Even in a man outwardly small, we see the great work of the Creator of all. In a burst of bright inspiration, man has been co-created by the Creator, and with his birth has been created for him a paradise on earth. Nothing and no one has power over the Creator's supreme co-creation. His bursts of love and bright inspiration are already comprehended in each engendered moment for the world. Of all the beings in the unfathomable universe, only one is capable of influencing his destiny by coming between God, paradise, a star of happiness, and man. So, I queried, does that mean that there is a being in the world more powerful than God? There is nothing in the world more powerful than divine inspiration, replied Anastasia, but there is a being equal to it in power, capable of coming between God, the most tender educator, and the angelic child, man. And who is that? How is he called? That being is man, the parent. What? But how can it happen that parents can wish unhappiness for their children? Everyone wants happiness, but they have forgotten the path to happiness. That is why they are perpetuating violence out of good intentions. Can you offer proof, even just a little, of what you say? I asked. You spoke of various systems of raising children, Anastasia responded. Think about it. There are many systems, but there is only one truth, and this alone means that the many are leading in the wrong direction. How can one tell the true system from a false one? Try to look at life with an open heart, purify thought from vain and fruitless art, and then you will see the world, the Creator of the universe, and yourself. Where are the eyes of the heart in the place of ordinary eyes? Who is capable of discerning all this? Couldn't you talk about things in more specific terms, and in simpler conversational phrases? You said that your language would be similar to mine, but you are talking differently, and you are making me talk like you. I can sense how you are talking differently. Only a wee bit differently, and you will be able to remember the gist of what I say, and my speech will mix with your words, and do not worry, do not feel shy about the combinations of words you use. Your language will be understandable to many people. It will reveal to many hearts the essence concealed in those very hearts. Let the poetry of the universe express itself in the way you write. What's going on here? I don't want anyone to change the way I write. But yet you were offended when a journalist called your language stilted. I, along with your readers, can make it so your language may leap from stilted into the best sounding of all time. Well, okay, let's have it that way down the road, but for now, I just want to hear simple language. As it is, the issue is so complex, it is incomprehensible. How does it all happen? And how come parents are closing off the path to happiness for their children? And is it that, in fact, what is really happening? First of all, I have to be convinced that that is really the case. Fine, if you have to be convinced, try recalling scenes from your own childhood. But that's hard to do. Not everyone can recall things that happened in their infancy. And why might that be? Is it not because memory attempts to spare our feelings and excise what is empty and fruitless? Tries to erase any suggestion of hopelessness, to rub out what you experienced in your mother's womb when you sensed the world's verbal abuse through the sufferings of your mother? Do you want me to help you recall the other things? Well, you can give it a try. What other things were there that have gone from my memory? The other things are not things you wish to remember. You are reluctant to remember how you, the ruler of the universe, lay all by yourself, helpless, in your crib. You were so tightly wrapped up it was like being bound in a cocoon, and smiling people decided when you should eat and when you should sleep. You wanted to think everything through for yourself, to make sense of what was going on. But so often they would simply make cooing sounds and toss you up toward the ceiling. But what for? You never got a chance to think about that. After growing a little, you began to see a great many things around you that had no voice and no heart. But you were not allowed to touch them. You could only touch those things which people handed you. And you resigned yourself to trying to figure out where was the perfection in any of the joy toys you were offered. But there was no way you could have found in this absurd, primitive object what had never been there in the first place and never could. But still you kept searching. You did not completely give up. You felt things with your hands. You tried to bite them, but to no avail. You did not find any explanation. That was when you first wavered. You who were born to be the ruler of the universe, you decided that you were unable to decide anything for yourself. You were betrayed by those who gave you birth, and you betrayed yourself. You talk about the events of my life. Was there anything in which I was different from other kids? I am talking specifically about you, and about those who are listening to me at the moment. So that must mean there are many rulers of the universe. If each one of us is born to be one, how can that be? What sense does it make being a ruler if there are many ruling over the same thing? Or does that mean there are many universes? There's one universe, just one, indivisible. But in that one universe, each one of us has his own space and is responsible for the whole. Each one is responsible. So where is it? My space, I mean. It has been lost, but you will find it. When did I manage to lose it? When you gave up. What do you mean I gave up? I was just like all the other kids. Like all the other children, you believed in the kindness of the people around you. You believed in your parents, and you began more and more to repress your own desires. And you accepted their belief that you were nothing but an ignorant, insignificant youngster. And the sensations inculcated in you by the abuse of your childhood kept on haunting you throughout your life, even to the point of attempting to reproduce themselves in your offspring. You went to school like everyone else. There you were told how man was nothing but a monkey, how he was a primitive creature, how foolish he was to believe in God. You were told about how there was just one leader who knew everything, a leader chosen by the people, a leader who alone was more worthy and more intelligent than anyone else. And you got carried away with poems about that leader. You began glorifying him without a second thought. It wasn't just that I extolled and read verse, as I was told. I actually believed it back then. Yes, many people read verse. There were even competitions to see who could extol him better than anyone else, and you tried to be the best. So did everyone else back then. Yes, the whole system demanded that everyone have the same aspirations, and thereby perpetuated violence on everyone. I tried to break people to preserve it. It tried to break people to preserve itself. But then, all at once, partway through your life, you discovered that there were a lot of systems out there, and that they were all different. Then you discovered that man, quite possibly, was never a monkey. And the very wise leader turned out to be a very stupid tyrant. And it turned out that your generation had been living life all wrong. Now there was a new system to live by. And then you became a parent, and unthinkingly you handed over your daughter to the new system, as though you were doing her a favor. You were not thinking as you did before. You used to wonder when your toys made noise, but you don't wonder anymore. Having accepted abuse yourself as normal state of affairs, you began abusing your own child. Century after century, various systems have come and gone, one after the other, but all with a single goal: to kill you, a ruler and wise creator, and transform you into a soulless slave. The system always operates through parents, and through those who proclaim themselves to be wise teachers. They will come up with new teachings, thereby engendering a whole new system. And it does not take much investigation to see clearly that they are motivated by the age-old ambition to separate you from God, to come between you and make you and God try to live and work only for them. This is the core of any system, and you, Vladimir, started asking me to create yet another system. I shall not be able to fulfill your request. You must look around you, try to make sense of things through your heart alone. Tell me, Anastasia, what about our son? Do you mean to say that living out here in the dense taiga among the wild beasts, he has not known violence even in the least? He knows neither violence nor fear. He is more than confident that everything here is subject to man, and that man is answerable for everything. But wasn't it violence, at least in a small degree, when the bear lapped his dirty bottom after he woke up? When he fell on his stomach after the bear lapped him? And she did this a second time after he began crawling again. And the second time, he fell down. The way I saw it, he really didn't like the bear lapping him like that. That was why he grabbed the bear by her muzzle, so she would stop pushing him with her tongue. And right at this point, the bear stopped lapping him. A little later, he will realize the significance of this procedure, but right now he sees it as a game. He himself plays with the bear and wants her to chase him. You say man is the wisest creature in the universe, Anastasia, but here our son is being raised by wild animals. That's not quite normal. I saw one time on TV how they showed a person who was already grown up. As a young lad, he had landed among wolves, and when he was grown up, people caught him, and it was a long time before he could talk anything like a human being. He seemed quite backward mentally. As far as our son is concerned, Anastasia replied, all the wild animals around do not serve as child raisers, but rather as good, kind, capable nannies who sincerely love our little boy. And there is no doubt they would be ready at any moment to give their lives for their little fellow. Have you been giving them this kind of training for a long time? Did your grandfather and great-grandfather help you? What need is there for training? Everything was done ages ago by the Creator. But how could he have foreseen everything in advance, to be able to teach each creature what to do in any given instance? Back there in the glade, as I was watching, our son was looking at the squirrels, and one in particular caught his fancy. He held out his little hand to it, smiled, and uttered a drawn-out sound. And the squirrel dashed right over to him, that same squirrel that caught his eye. The little one then played with it, took it by its paw, and stroked its tail. Now how could the Creator have foreseen this particular situation and taught the squirrel what to do? The Creator is wise. He made everything more simple and to perfection. How? From a man who is free from aggression, selfishness, fear, and many other dark feelings which came along later, emanates the light of love. Even though it is invisible to the eye, it is stronger than the light of the sun. Its energy is life-giving. The way the Creator arranged things, only man is endowed with such a tremendous ability. Only man. He alone is capable of bringing warmth to all living creatures. That is why all living creatures are drawn to him. As Vladimir, our little son, was paying attention to the squirrels, he fixed his gaze on one of them in particular, concentrated his attention on it, and his warmth went out to that little squirrel. In this warmth, the creature felt a sense of grace, and rushed toward the source, and was delighted to play with him. Our son can summon any animal that way. Thanks to the Creator, all newborns have such an ability. When they are still in the space of love, and nothing yet has erased this magnificent element within them. The space of love begins with the mother's womb, and then only spreads apace. Only man is endowed with the power to wreck or perfect this space. My grandfather did train the eagle, you remember that, and thereby introduced a new element into the space of love. This is what my forebears, my forefathers and foremothers have been doing from time immemorial. Now, tomorrow will be a special day, and you will see what happens. Tomorrow will be an important day for the future.